And going into our first panel, I think a really fitting segue, Confronting Hard Truths, Assyrians in Iraq. Panelists will address recent political and security developments in northern Iraq, examining the policies and key actors like the United States and assessing prospects for the future. And moderating this panel will be Rain Hanna.
All right. Really quickly, thank you, Alex, for the introduction. Just before we jump into this panel, I do want to acknowledge my incredible colleague, Ishtar Sayedi. I don't know where she just went. She left the room. Okay. She's amazing. And she doesn't ever say this. She used to work for Congressman Josh Harder, who, as you heard earlier today, is the lead sponsor on the Assyrian Genocide Resolution. Congressman Harder is the sponsor. Ishtar is the author of that resolution. So she's incredible. So I wish she was in the room to hear this applause for her, but we'll tell her about it later. That said, we are really inspired by the conversations that have taken place here thus far, and really looking forward to moving into this one. As you might know, we were supposed to be joined here by Fareed Yaqoob, who is a member of parliament in the Iraqi Kurdistan region. Unfortunately, he could not be here today. He did send over a video, so we're going to go ahead and play that. We got this video late last night, so unfortunately we weren't able to add translation. It is in the Assyrian language. I'll do a quick summary after we play, if that's all right.
شلام خطرين شلام لوخن خرواتن اتلان صورت هايتون سباي دي قماين بروخن خوباضة ديوخن اتلي صورت هايتون هماشة منتيانة اتلي صورة قد اقرت ديوخن مطي اختي لازم قدوب الخانة شعرات بلاخيتون بيه وهبدا يدان اطلب من بخل دا قد لمسة لقى الشركة نعموخن هلبت بدايتون قد أنا رابا جيتين أمريكا رابا شوف أنا خيشين هش قصرة لتلي من ملوءة فيزا إن مشان أمر قد أي جيويلا قصرك وملوءة أخذ بدايتون إدخل مبيونة لكن بقولنا خصوصا لخا مال إدخاش كيف يعني قبض دني همزة مياتي همزة مخلي درقو الشلطان تلخا قبض هذا إدخاش كيف إلا نقو يعني كزدنا خورواثن إن كسلوخ وقت الأمريكاي أمر بالزودة قبل هذا طلب مني حكمة بوقارة قد يوم الحكمة شو رقم يويلي قديجو كونسولة الأمريكاي لخا وأدي البدلة خيار خزودة هالأمر خيار وخايو ما أخذ بخشاوين وهلا دي بسبارن قد شغلنا فيزا أتلي صورت هايتون منتيان قبل خالد ديوخن هايتون بسي مرابقة شتا هايتون بسي مرابقة إيقارة ديوخن قديا هلبت أخنن بلخانن هما شبتهاو أمينايا شرارة هما شبت أمرخلة إيكت إيلا هما شبهاو مساترانة الزدق وهاقويات أمتن أوبن هاو شكيات إلن أوبن هاو ممريثة قديا أخن هجنا عليه تخمن من هج من دي تخمنتن قميثة وخريثة إيلا قد أمتن مطيل نيشو الله يا حقويات ابن أمتن بيش شقيلة وبيش نطيرة وأثر داباثة إتلن صورة هايت المنتيانة إتلن صورة قد قاها خيتا بها مخضر شوبان خانة جو ميك الشوريات خانة قبل هذا طلابا قد يوخ منتيتا طلابا مورزم دانات بسيمة طلابا قد هم شقالوخ شاريرة هاو بياشو هاو شاريرة هجدان لمشليتون بود همزمت شرارة بود حق وياثة وزدقة وسنتت بالخانة امتنايا قو أثرا إلى خمد رابع أنقايا إطلان صورت هاي تمنتيانا بس مقانا خييتون إيقارا بيوخن إلى رابع قورا قبل مني كل خبة وإيقارا هل تبقى كوش مشينا.
So just to summarize for those that don't speak Assyrian, Mr. Yaqoob was unable to be here. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to secure a visa in time. Looks like he had some administrative challenges that prevented him from being here, but we look forward to welcoming him to future events. So can we get the PowerPoint up? And since it's just Michael and I, we figured we won't use the chairs this time around. While we get that set up, I just do want to take a brief moment to thank and acknowledge Steve Nasseri and Dikran Ego for being here from Assyrian Global Network and Assyria TV. He came all the way from Sweden. They're here on their own time. They're volunteering to be here and film these sessions so that they're accessible to a wider audience. We know there are a lot of people that couldn't be here today that wanted to be here, and so we're so thankful to you both, Steve and Dikran, for making that possible, making these sessions accessible. All right, so today's panel, as you know, is entitled Confronting Hard Truths, Assyrians in Iraq. Sam, I'm gonna need you to check me on time, okay? All right. So for those of you, I know that some of you are very familiar with these issues. Others might be learning about these issues for the first time, even though you are Assyrian. This is a map of Iraq. Different provinces, which are sort of like states in the United States, that are highlighted in the navy blue, are the provinces that today contain significant populations of Assyrians. So as you can see, we have Baghdad, and then Nineveh, Dohuk, Erbil, and Kirkuk. So when we are talking about Assyrians in northern Iraq, we're primarily talking about of course, the region in the north that's in that navy blue color. We can go over to the next slide. Oh, I have the clicker, I forgot. Okay. Now, when we refer to the Nineveh Plain, which if you follow the API, you've heard about the Nineveh Plain a lot. If you're not that familiar with the Nineveh Plain, where it's located and what that even means, the area sort of shaded in gray at the top is what's referred to as the Nineveh Plain. It's not a formal border. There's no official designation. It's just what our people call it, right? It's Deshtet Nineveh. It's the Nineveh Plain. But of course, that term has been used in U.S. legislation and whatnot now. But that is a term that came from the Assyrian community. As you can see on the map, the Nineveh Plain borders the Kurdistan region, which is a semi-autonomous region that is essentially, it operates like its own country within the country of Iraq. So it's governed by the Kurdistan Regional Government, which is run by the Barzani family. So it operates ostensibly as a democracy, but of course, for those that are familiar, that is very far from the truth. So the Nineveh Plain, again, borders the Kurdistan region. It's officially part of the Iraqi Federal Territory. So it's officially governed by the government in Baghdad, the central government, but it's referred to as disputed territory because the Kurdistan Regional Government claims that land, so places like Al-Qush, Tilkep, and elsewhere, as part of historical Kurdistan. And so the Nineveh Plain is significant because it does represent the largest concentration, or largest remaining concentration, I should say, of Assyrians in northern Iraq. And it really has become a focal point for the community and for advocacy, really, for the more than 2 decades now. Sorry, I keep forgetting that I have this clicker. Okay. So just to give you a background, I really just want to set the stage for Michael's presentation, walking us through the big bullet points, what happened in 2003 and since then, and what that means for Assyrians. So in 2003, I think some of you might have been really young at this time, but in 2003, the United States invaded Iraq. and as part of the process of de-Baathification. So the Ba'ath Party was, of course, Saddam Hussein's party. So as part of removing Ba'ath influence, we should say, it dismantled the Iraqi army. And because of that, the United States then authorized the Peshmerga, which are the official Kurdish forces, right? They are the official forces of the Kurdistan region, to deploy south into the Nineveh Plain, which, as you remember, is officially Iraqi territory, to help stop the spread of violence. Keep that in mind now. So the boots on the ground in the Nineveh Plain post-2003 are now Peshmerga, right? They're now Kurdish soldiers. Then in 2005, Iraqi elections are held, and Sunni Arabs who comprise the majority of residents in, or citizens, I should say, in Nineveh, boycott the Iraqi elections. This allows the dominant party that runs the Kurdistan regional government, the Kurdistan Democratic Party, or the KDP, to gain control over Nineveh Governorate, so over the provincial council, which sort of operates like a state assembly in the United States. So now, boots on the ground, security is controlled by the KRG, and then politically it's controlled by the KRG. Even though there is no significant Kurdish population in this area, it's predominantly Assyrians, Yazidis, and other minority groups. I think over on the, sorry, I keep forgetting I have this thing in my hand. The Iraqi Kurdistan region, or the KRG, first makes its claim, as I mentioned earlier, to this land as part of historical Kurdistan, which of course we know is not true, in its 2006 draft constitution. So that's the first time it ever appeared. Assyrians, of course, reject the idea that this land is Kurdish. Since 2003, as I mentioned, this has been really a focal point for advocacy, and Assyrians have been organizing and mobilizing and advocating for the creation of a standalone province in the Nineveh Plain, which, of course, as I mentioned, is very diverse. It's home to different ethno-religious groups, like, again, the Assyrians, Yazidis, Kakai, and others, Shebeks. And so the idea was that this province would allow these marginalized communities that were targeted for violence in 2003 onward to govern their own affairs and manage their own security, essentially serving as a safe haven of sorts. And this became a really paramount initiative because all of these communities, especially the Assyrians, saw their community, their population dwindling at a very rapid rate. Wonderful quote from, I think, from the National Review, really powerful quote from a priest. He said, remember I said that the Nineveh Plain is referred to as formally as disputed territory. He said, disputed by who? We have always lived here. Show me the Kurdish cemeteries if they claim this is their land. So I just wanted to share this quote to illustrate that those on the ground really do reject these claims. Now, in January 2014, there's a historic moment where the Iraqi Council of Ministers finally approves the creation of a Nineveh Plain governorate. Of course, we all know that several months later, unfortunately, we saw the rise of ISIS. Now, remember, at this time, the boots on the ground are the Peshmerga. 2 weeks before ISIS invaded the Nineveh Plain, of course, they had control of neighboring Mosul. The Peshmerga disarmed Assyrians and Yazidis and other communities that were living in the Nineveh Plain. They promised and pledged to protect them. And as soon as the ISIS advance was taking place, they withdrew without firing a single shot, exposing these communities to genocide, leaving them completely defenseless. Unfortunately, as you'll see, if you have a chance to check out the Nobody's Listening exhibition, this opened the door really for the Yazidi genocide, which is horrific, and you'll learn more about that if you do check out the VR exhibition. For Assyrians, of course, there were some casualties, some women that were taken as sexual captives, but for the most part, the large majority were able to flee. And so we're talking now, approximately 100,000 Assyrians that were emptied of their lands. And then just want to make sure I don't cover it. Okay, so in response to this, Otto touched on this earlier. Following 2014, in November 2014, Assyrians stood up and decided that not only did they want to help liberate their lands from ISIS control, but they wanted to contribute to the long-term security to make sure that what happened in 2014, which they predicted, would never happen again. And so the Nineveh Plain Protection Units was formed. At its peak, the NPU had 600 soldiers. All of them were of Assyrian background. They are residents of the Nineveh Plain. These are people who themselves were abandoned by the Peshmerga, who fled ISIS and then returned to liberate their lands and then again to defend their people. So just have some photos there. Just to give you a sense of how this force operated, so it wasn't just like a random group of Assyrians that decided they were suddenly a security force. They were legitimate and they were authorized to operate in the Nineveh Plain under what's called the Popular Mobilization Force structure. So this, the PMF, this was a parallel state security institution that was instituted following the rise of ISIS to help bolster the Iraqi army and help fight ISIS. And so the NPU was formed under that branch. It was legal, and they were reporting directly to Iraq's national security advisor. I just have that kind of map for you to visualize that. This is important because I'm going to come back to it later. The Nineveh Plain was liberated from ISIS control in late 2016, early 2017. It was fully liberated. What we started to see in the years that followed, especially the year after going on into 2018, 2019, was that the areas that were secured by the NPU saw the highest return rates among Assyrians. And the reasons for this are clear. People one, could not trust the dominant security forces, right? So the Iraqi army and the Peshmerga, who had abandoned them to ISIS. But more so, of course, people feel safer when those that are securing their neighborhoods, securing their towns, have familial and communal ties to the communities there. That way they know that they will be protected in the event of an attack. And so because of this, we saw that security really was the main factor that determined whether or not those displaced by ISIS were going to return. And the API, of course, was founded in 2018, so after the NPU. And since the API's founding, our primary and really priority policy advocacy goal was to help bring about sustainable security in the Nineveh Plain, and the NPU really embodied that policy. I'm going to ask Michael to come up here in a minute, but I just want to say that Michael, myself, and others were involved across two administrations, so with the Trump administration and then with the Biden administration, in a series of meetings with senior level officials at the White House, National Security Council, Department of Defense, Department of State, working to advance this policy. And the policy itself, as the officials remarked, was viable, and it was actionable, and it was working. Unfortunately, it didn't. The answer that we got, and again, we were seeking support in the form of training and supplies and, of course, weaponry and whatnot to help bolster this force, because we knew that operating, as a 600-man force wasn't sustainable in the long run. And there were still competing actors, the Peshmerga, there were Iranian-backed forces, and, of course, the Iraqi army operating in the same space. It wasn't a sustainable solution. So we were putting forward the NPU really as this important policy that the U.S. could commit to if it was serious about its commitment to protecting and preserving groups like Assyrians in Iraq. And unfortunately, the answer that we got, frankly, was no. And we got that from two administrations. Michael is going to speak more about that, so I'm going to let him speak on that. But the one thing that I sort of want to conclude in saying is that in November last year, there was a very troubling development, but one that was foreseen and one that we had warned about in all of our meetings. I mean, I testified in congressional hearings and I spoke to this. I mentioned briefly, and I know that this is a lot of information, especially for those of you that are new to these issues. But if you recall in that in this diagram that I showed you, there are forces that are authorized or that were initially authorized under the PMF structure, so the same structure as the NPU, that were actually nominally, under the control of the Iraqi government, but they're reporting to Iranian security forces. So they were loyal to Iran. These are, if you've heard in the media, if you read articles, the Iranian-backed militias. And so these forces were operating in the same, region in the Nineveh Plain. And after the elections in 2021, the Babylon Brigade, which is part of which is, a faction of the Badr organization, which is a very strong Shia Arab organization that operates throughout Iraq and has ties to Iran, lashed out because they sustained major losses politically in the elections, that included attacking the U.S. embassy in Baghdad. That included an assassination attempt on the prime minister, and that also included issuing a unilateral order to reassign the NPU under the command and control of the Babylon Brigades, which is again a force that operates under the command and control of Iran. And it's something that is not only harmful to the local communities and threatens their future, but is something that, of course, the NPU rejects. Unfortunately, the U.S. didn't, although we sounded the alarm bells, and when this originally was taking place, we had, again, these senior level meetings with senior officials at the State Department, again, Department of Defense, National Security Council. Again, the message that we got was that the U.S. was not going to step in, and unfortunately, that order still stands today. I'm happy to address questions about that later, but essentially that means that, of course, NPU command was replaced. There are some NPU soldiers that remained in this capacity, still serving in their day-to-day roles, really trying to assure the security of their families and whatnot. But there were, of course, a good number that resigned in protest. And so it's very unfortunate. I think some of you might be hearing that for the first time today. It was really a devastating development, but that order stands. And I'm going to have you take the mic, Mike, if you're ready. I'm just going to say, these are photos that I had taken myself when I visited the NPU base back in 2016. I just wanted to share this sort of as a snapshot. I mean, these are people that could be your brothers or your cousins. These are, young men that were abandoned to ISIS. And unfortunately, they were also abandoned by the U.S. Just to, again, put into perspective the situation right now, as I mentioned earlier, the population decline has really been staggering. There's an estimated 1.5 million Assyrians in Iraq in 2003 or before 2003. And right now, there are some estimates that are as low as 100,000. And so, there's been a 90% decline in the Assyrian population in Iraq as a result of the U.S. invasion, and still the U.S. is committed to the policies that ultimately enabled this. So with that said, I'm going to actually turn it over to Mike.
It's a privilege to be here with you. Obviously, there's the great work of API, the team, and API, the people. Am I good? Yeah. But it's really you. And so it's my privilege to be here with all of you, truly. Let's go with a little bit of humor, maybe. I once heard a quote, never wear a hat that has more character than you. I don't really wear hats, so I apply that to my PowerPoints. And so they are very dry, and it's just a testament to the wonderful characters that you've had before I took the stage. There are several people in this room with enough years behind them or experience to possibly have seen where I've used that title before. It was a talk commemorating Fareed Yaqoob. Sapere ode, which is a Latin expression which means courage in the face of truth, or literally dare to be wise, because with wisdom comes hard things that need to be digested and understood. And I thought it was fitting to bring it up again given the panel discussion topic. So I have a couple goals, and the primary one is a discussion. So I'm not tracking time, but I'll try and get through this quickly actually, because I have discussion questions, but I also hope you have questions. I want to open up the floor to that. So I've told you what sapere ode must mean, but in terms of this presentation, my goal for this crowd is to learn the core lessons of at least the last 20 years, the last 2 decades. When Rain said lots of you were really young when certain things happened, I like to think I was really young too. And then also the courage to accept and move past what we have to understand is failure, right? We do. We in terms of results, I mean, you saw the demographics. That can't be construed as success, right? Now, that's not to be grim or to be self-defeating. It's to have courage in the face of the truth. So what I want to do very quickly is just give you, Rain gave you a really wonderful panoramic flow through of issues and developments that happened over the last several decades, the last couple decades. I want to give you some highlights through a legislative prism, but there's a goal in this, and I apologize to those of you that have seen this before. I am drawing on content from other presentations, but you'll see the method to the madness here, or maybe just a repetition. In 2007 there are just numerous pieces of legislation that Assyrian Americans mobilized, acted on as a community, and really got things going in Congress, got things going at DOD, got things going at the Department of State. And I want you to understand that for a very important reason. In September 2007, and the only things I'm referencing here are appropriations bills, which means it's law. These are not resolutions, not that resolutions aren't important. These are not legislative measures that can be bogged down. These are actionable legislative measures because they're appropriations bills. And the first one in 2007 required the State Department to say what the heck it was doing in terms of funding for Assyrians, Yazidis, other vulnerable indigenous minorities, because nothing was being done. There was a de-development and a disempowerment of Iraq's most vulnerable peoples, including Assyrians. And so Congress, Assyrians through Congress, forced the State Department and USAID to explain what was going on. And in November 2007, we had to fight to get the answer. In November 2007, we got that answer. It was addressed to the chair of the subcommittee at the time, Frank Wolf. And in a nutshell, it says, don't bother reading it. In a nutshell, it says, we know that they're being politically marginalized. In fact, they were disenfranchised. We know they're subject to physical violence and economic discrimination. In fact, they even name that it's through the KRG's Minister of Finance, who at that time is an Assyrian named Sergis Akhajan. They name all this. But then they say, on the basis of relative need, it would be inappropriate to single out this group for special attention. Right? That was the answer. That is US policy. So we came back a year later. No. We want cash. We want you to make it rain. And it started with $10 million being appropriated for indigenous vulnerable minorities in the Nineveh Plains, including Yazidis. Right? So we got appropriations bills passed. You'll see where some of this goes in a minute. Security. In 2006, Joint Military Operations Command and Iraq's Ministry of the Interior under CPF had this structure set up to allow, the American expression at the time was, Iraqis to stand up so Americans could stand down, right? Local security. So a 2006 order was implemented. The Nineveh governorate was controlled by the KDP at that time. He was the deputy governor. His name is Khosrow Goran. He was the head of the 16th branch of the KDP in that area at the time. But in fact, he was the de facto governor. He was the authority. The KDP controlled the area. And they were blocking implementation of this order that was allowed to be rolled out elsewhere. By 2008, the activity of Assyrians in Iraq, free Assyrians in Iraq, ones that are not encumbered or beholden to other masters, championed the issue in Iraq, and free Assyrians in the United States mobilized to the point where Congressman Kirk of Illinois, who I just want to indicate is a naval intelligence officer who served in the Balkans, indicated to Ambassador Ryan Crocker in a hearing, he said, I don't think we've had detailed plans for any other set of villages in Iraq, but we certainly have it for these villages. And in that hearing, Ambassador Crocker indicated that the Assyrian police force is now moving forward. It will be made up of 700 Assyrian Christians from the Nineveh Plains. That was change that free Assyrians in Iraq, free Assyrians in America mobilized to create, and the police force got started. It hit a force total of 450 ballpark before the following happened. This order came in from Nineveh Governorate, actually, the Interior Ministry, but through Nineveh Governorate, reassigning that police force. And basically, they did three things. They took away their weapons if they were going to stay in the Nineveh Plains. They reallocated their salaries, and the other thing that they did is they repositioned them or redeployed them out of the Nineveh Plains, specifically to churches and monasteries in the city of Mosul. So this Nineveh Plains police force, get out. And right after that order was put into effect, that same Minister of Finance from the Kurdistan region of Iraq, who happens to be an Assyrian but works for the KDP, which is a organization mobilized on Kurdish nationalism, brought in informal, what are called church guards as security, with Zeravani and Peshmerga as other forms of security. And you only need to think right back to Rain's presentation to know the efficacy of Peshmerga in securing us. They set us up for genocide. So I told you about the money. After the All Saints' Day massacre in 2010, I was actually in school, back in school at the University of Toronto, when I got a call with other leaders both in Iraq and in the United States to join the State Department and congressional leaders on a call. Thankfully, my supervisor gave me his office. It was an emergency. And they said, what can be done after this horrific massacre? There was a number of issues that were high priority, but one of the things we inserted into that agenda is for the GAO, the Government Accountability Office, to do an audit of the money that we had appropriated for Assyrians and Yazidis and others as vulnerable indigenous peoples in Iraq, namely Assyrians though. This is the letter from Congress asking the GAO to do this audit. All information data was provided both in Iraq and here. This is part of the mandate letter for it. So the GAO came back taking USAID's information. Oh, just for what it's worth, in the course of 3.5 years, we appropriated, here it says about 40 million. It was $42 million in 3.5 years that we appropriated. You know there was no efficacy of this on the ground. You would have heard about it. You would have known about it. It would have made a difference. In fact, it was channeled predominantly through the organizations and governing authorities that oppressed us with the money. But even the GAO concluded that these lists showed that numerous minority groups were beneficiaries, and they wiped this away. I'm showing you this, whether it's the money, whether it's security, no matter what it is, that we are not getting the results of advocacy in the way that we approach it and with the strategy behind it and the premises on which we approach this advocacy work. And that's what I want you to really understand. And then there's the ultimate. And when I say the ultimate, I mean it. Genocide. Right? Genocidal violence. It was in March 2016 that finally the Obama administration recognized that what was happening amounted to genocide. I want it noted for the record that that ranges anywhere from 19 to 22 months to recognize what the Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination at the United Nations defined as genocide within weeks. Okay? It took the Obama administration 19 to 22 months to say it. But right when they said it, the day that they said genocide is happening, the State Department came out and said that this finding imposes no new obligations beyond what is already being done. Genocide recognition, a lot of people, in fact, people in this room worked on this. And this is what it meant. And now into the present with the NPU and building off of what you heard from Rain. There's a piece out, I encourage everyone to read it, Iraq's Other Minorities Still Endangered, by a colleague and dear friend and fellow Umtanaya Mardeen Isaac in New Lines magazine, who references what you saw in Rain's data points about the NPU's efficacy, right? It was getting people back. It is and capable of getting people back under the right command. But in a nutshell, because I do want to allow for discussion and questions, the DOD's Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Middle East, Simone Ladine, Trump appointee, indicated that the U.S. saw the future of Iraqi security exclusively in the terms of the Iraqi army and the Peshmerga and shut it down. And you'll learn more about that in the article if you choose to read it. Fast forward to the Biden administration. The Deputy Assistant Secretary for Iraq, elections have consequences. What does she mean by that? Well, I will tell you. What she's saying is this is after the last elections, the most recent elections in Iraq, in which the Badr organization, an Iranian-backed, Iranian-led organization, swept the elections to the extent that the parties funded by the KDP to steal our original votes complained about the Badr organization's electoral theft against them. But what the State Department was telling us, and this is a Biden-led administration at the time, is those elections, in our eyes, are to be treated by you as legitimate. Even though, go to API's website, read and empower yourself, the most obvious evidence is out there of absolute electoral theft. Regions, governorates, districts with no Assyrians in them voted for those quota seats reserved for our community. Those are some hard truths. And I will have failed in this discussion and failed you if you allow any of that to discourage you. Because you shouldn't be discouraged. Not only should you not be discouraged, I think you should be proud. Right? The NPU worked. And guess what? We created it. It wasn't created by Nukhraya. It wasn't created by others. Assyrians in Iraq, with the support of Assyrians in diaspora, put it together. And it got support. Under Operation Inherent Resolve, the NPU was trained. Because under Operation Conquest, which is the actual combat operation against ISIS, the NPU is the only listed Assyrian force as an ally. Because all the others were under either Iranian-controlled forces or primarily KDP-controlled forces. And so they weren't technically in any way empowered to do anything. And they didn't. The NPU did. Created by Assyrians, for Assyrians. They said, our first mission is to liberate the area. They participated in it actively, successfully. They said, our goal is to facilitate return. And in the areas where they were allowed to operate, not blocked by the Peshmerga, they were successful, the highest rates of return, hands down, no contest. The one thing they couldn't work on is supporting the creation of a province, because we weren't allowed to make that progress, and ultimately you've seen what's happened now. Advocacy worked in terms of passing legislation. We mobilized, we did the right thing, we spoke truth to power. We didn't just complain about the problems, we proposed solutions that make sense, to the point where at least some members of Congress could say, this makes sense. What's wrong with doing this? Assyrian work is exceptional. Against all odds, we do these things. Against all odds, we do these things. That 2008 security force, some of the highest, most scary leaders in the land said, we will take this force apart with our bare hands. They had blocked it for 2 years, and we jammed it in, but it was allowed to be destroyed. But at this point, I want you, and this is where we pivot in the presentation to what I hope will be a lively discussion. When that force was disassembled, and as you heard from Rain and the brief from me, when the NPU had a spike driven through it to try and kill it, what was US policy? Accept it. Not just accept it. When somebody says to you, elections have consequences, they're saying, go negotiate with Badr. Don't negotiate with us. You're on your own. So when I started this by saying we approach our strategy mistakenly, what I'm saying is we operate as a people on the premise that the USG prioritizes legal and constitutional rights equally for all. They don't. Now you might call us naive, but when you're in the situation that you're in, you push for the rights that you can claim. Right? But it hasn't produced the results we need. So where do we go from here? We absolutely need to continue speaking truth to power. That NDAA reporting requirement you heard, I tip my hat to API and all of you that were involved in it. Because we now need to fight for the reporting information to come in, which you're going to have to fight for. And then you're going to have to fight for it to be made more transparent. But when you do, you will learn information that will further empower you and empower your fight. Continue speaking truth to power, but this time have no illusions about the US government, about the government of Iraq, about the KRG, about the EU, about UNAMI, United Nations Assistance Mission to Iraq. Have no illusions about them. And as you speak truth to power, use as your anchor, use as your North Star the principle of maximizing our community's decisional autonomy, the capacity to decide things for ourselves. What does that mean practically as a point of contrast? When a Biden administration's policy through the State Department is elections have consequences, which means you negotiate with those people, submit to them, subject yourselves to them. What they're saying is, you have representatives that were imposed on you, selected by you, paid by others to steal your seats. We accept the fact that you have no decisional autonomy. Reject that. Because there are still Assyrians who are seeking to maximize our people's decisional autonomy. That's who you support. You identify them and you get behind them. With external governments, externally, what does it mean in terms of maintaining accountability? Hold and push on those issues as aggressively as you can. And internally, it means identifying those unfree organizations nominally constituted by Assyrians but funded by the KDP and Badr, hold them accountable internally. Make it so that they're ashamed to show their faces anywhere. Make it so that you can help them understand not what contempt you have for them, but what they're doing. Now that was on the advocacy side. And if you're going to fight for our rights, I don't think it should be narrowly limited to advocacy. It's not the only way to fight and protect yourself. You could also get stronger. You can get stronger. We can get stronger. And by that, I don't want to suggest we're weak. I've traveled, not as much as I would like, most Assyrian communities in Europe, a lot of Assyrian communities in America, and I am stunned to the point of shocked pride about our capacity as a people. But we don't utilize it, because we're not organized to utilize it. We haven't organized ourselves to utilize it. But I am blown away by what, I work for an organization that works on international policies around the world in terms of the fields that are relevant to us as Assyrians. Our human capital is through the roof. Our human capital is through the roof. It's immeasurable, it's unquantifiable, and you need to embrace that, but accept the fact that we as a people have never organized to channel that power, to channel that strength. So we need to focus ourselves on strengthening the community in every way, in every aspect of our existence, in every aspect of our life as Assyrians. And use that strength to allow Assyrians to thrive in the diaspora and in Assyria. I want to declare some humility in saying this. I'm risking being a little bit inappropriate, but picking off of part of Bedri's heartfelt expressions to us, he was making a reference to envisioning a situation in which those who would harm us would think twice. And what he's talking about is the fact that things are done to our community right now with impunity. And I've just showed you that no one has come to our defense ever. Even when they created policies to do so, they did the opposite. We can only empower ourselves. That's what the NPU is and was. And it doesn't just have to be in security, it could be in every way. And that's just one aspect of it. But we need to fully, right now, right here, every one of you, embrace and accept responsibility. I know you want to let yourselves off the hook, but you got yourself to this conference, so you're now responsible. You really are. And see that as a challenge. But no one's in our community, in our people, have organized in this way to mobilize power in at least a century. We need to change our mindset. We need to change the way we think about ourselves in every facet to do so. So you, and I really mean this, you, not me, not Rain, not others, you need to do what Assyrians for the last century could or would not do, because they couldn't envision it. They couldn't see themselves in that way for a myriad reasons. Intergenerational trauma, sense of victimization, real oppression, the fact that we're fighting regional superpowers, right? But those aren't excuses, those are just hard truths. But if you can find the courage, this is what we need to do. Other peoples have done this. Others have done this. The most common comparators that I've heard are Armenian, Jewish, and Kurdish peoples have done this. In some respects, facing even far more dire situations. But they found ways to reorganize themselves to do it. But I would add to that. So it's not unprecedented. You know, those communities, whether they have successful lobbies and advocacy efforts and reach, and that came long after they developed the power to fight for themselves, mobilize resources for themselves, help themselves in times of dire crisis, humanitarian crisis. That comes first, and that's what we haven't done. But I would add to those The Black consciousness movement, starting the myriad authors, but Steve Biko onwards. Self-empowerment, community empowerment. And for a number of reasons, we're not facing the same disadvantages that the Black consciousness movement face. That's a reality. We have advantages. But we're also facing an existential crisis, and it behooves us to take advantage of those advantages to do something, but recognize that other peoples have done it in far more dire situations, like the Black consciousness movement, like the indigenous peoples who are leading an indigenous resurgence in Canada. Right? So not only do you need to do it, it's not something that's never been done. So why aren't we doing it, despite the myriad advantages we have and the enormous human capital we have? So lastly, some perspective. Speaking truth to power and focusing on minnan illan or ganan qaganan, that self-empowerment, are mutually inclusive. They're not mutually exclusive. One can empower the other. Innovation is why Assyrians have survived across millennia. We were living in Mesopotamia, the land between two rivers. I'm quoting, I'm not an ancient historian, archaeologist, none of that. Just read the books. We were oppressed. We were vassals to others. And then we said, this sucked. And then we innovated an administration. It wasn't a war machine. It was an administration before. It was a method of organizing at its time that not only had made a lasting contribution to human civilization, but has kept us around thousands of years when other peoples have disappeared. We're still here. And so I think it means, and this is just for me, I ask myself on a regular basis, where are we in 100, 500, 1,000 years? We are always focused on the next crisis, but where are we going to be in a century? Start thinking that way. Where are your great-grandkids going to be? Who will they be in this world? What are you giving them? And I've already been a horrible messenger to you, so I'm going to add to the horrible messengers. I hate to tell you, my generation and the generations before me haven't bequeathed much to you as an inheritance. You're not working with much. I'm not saying you're working from scratch, but we haven't given you a lot to work with. But where do you see your great-grandchildren, your people, your community, in a global sense? Where do you see it in 100, 500, and 1,000 years? We somehow survived 5 more, okay? Off of the legacy of what others did. What are we going to do? So I hope this will be the focus of maybe a short discussion here. How much time do we have, Samantha? We're good for time? Okay. But also outside of this room and when you go home and when you go back to your communities. So I do want to open the floor for questions, but I have a couple myself to prompt. I'll just throw them out there. And do people see Ganan Qaygan and Minan Ilan in our nation? Ask yourselves, are we a diaspora nation? There's multiple ways to think about it. Some of you might think the answer is obvious, some of you might not. Are we a diaspora nation? What are the implications if we are or are not? And what do you disagree with? I welcome disagreement. If you know me, I love debate. You please feel free to criticize, open up new ways of thinking. Let's go.
I'll ask them.
Yeah,
I'm loud too, so I'm happy to. We have 2 mics right here.
Hold on, no, Annette.
I'll stand. Michael, thank you so much. That was firstly really motivating and inspiring. This whole conference has been so far. So, I mean, my question is, it's clear to us that a lot of us here in this room right now feel this weight on our shoulders, and we feel like armed and ready to try to do things and get involved. I, however, think, and I'm not trying to say anything mean or bad about our community, I just think that there are a lot of people that are comfortable in their current lifestyles and maybe apathetic is the word to all of this, or blind, and they're comfortable in the US where things are different, where we look white, we're white passing. How do we get them involved? Because it's clear that we need numbers. Like,
Yeah.
we're all here, we're all ready, we're all excited, right? but maybe a lot of us aren't.
Yeah.
And I have a hard time convincing others to be excited about this.
Okay, so this is the worst thing I can do because you're going to think I'm eliding the question. I'm not. I can give a partial answer, but nothing in what I've said or what you know of me should indicate I have the answers. This is a discussion, and it's a discussion that's going to continue, but towards answering these questions. Offhand, I would immediately go to education within our communities. We need strong community organizations that are educating our generation and younger generations to be free Assyrians who are conscious of their place in history and inculcate a sense of pride. And this is what is done in all these other peoples and all these other movements and senses of liberation and emancipation from a colonized mind, effectively. That's one part of it only. But there's another aspect I would want you all to consider. For many of us who work actively, and that's most of the people in the room, it's not unfair to say it's a sacrifice, meaning as a raw opportunity cost, there's no net return to your life for what we do. Why? Why? Why is it a sacrifice? Why is work for your community a net loss? Why can't it be something that actually benefits individuals, that benefits the people? Again, I'll give one illustration, but I don't want it to skew our understanding. It easily could, because there are 1,000 examples of this. Just one that I saw. The Armenian National Council of America, I think it's called, they invited me to their offices after we passed that first piece of legislation for 10 million. I'll tell you why. Because that year there was a moratorium on any new appropriations. And so they wanted, the powerful Armenian advocacy organization wanted to figure out, wait a minute, who the heck are these Assyrians? We didn't know they were in Washington. We know who they are, but we didn't know they were in Washington. And how did they do it when we were all told no one can? So I went to their offices and I discovered that there's a whole bureau there in their office that uses local community organizations to channel employment opportunities in Washington, D.C. for youth, for graduates. Okay, you know what? I would say it's fair to, I would think it's fair to say that there's some members in those communities who are active in their organizations, and one thing they think about alongside how good it makes them feel, how good it feels to give, what shared community means, but it might help my bank balance. It might help my career. It might help fulfill my actual individual dreams. Why is that wrong? What is America about? Right? Why can't we see ourselves being that? And that's part of this mindset change. But that can only come when we're building the strength to make those things happen. That's a partial answer. I don't have, not only do I not have all the answers, I mean, I only have a tiny fraction of them, but I do feel comfortable saying we can answer these questions because our abilities in these fields is outstanding, right? We just haven't organized ourselves to do it. Josh, right?
Yes.
Hold on.
Oh, I've got a loud voice, but I'll...
Do we have 10 minutes? Yeah, okay. So we have 10 minutes. Just, are we
All right,
going over time?
I'll make
for
this
that?
quick. Rain, did you... Okay. Does everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I just need to open with a very brief statement that touches on the whole Garan thing. All right. One of the reasons why there's still an Assyrian presence in Tur Abdin, even during Sefo, and I'm saying this because we have Assyria TV here, Ma'arboye, is because they organized a successful defense at Aywardo, which unfortunately didn't happen in Hakkari, which is the only region that is completely depopulated of Assyrians today. And as far as you talk about Armenians, I taught a student when I was at Oregon State University who speaks Western Armenian, and his great-grandfather fought at Musadag. So everything does hinge on self-defense. So what I'm wondering is if and when the Nineveh protection units, again get revived and become an autonomous Assyrian entity, if there is a list of Assyrian Americans with military experience, and I'm no Khraya, but I have military experience, including combat experience, to go back to Assyria. Because I have friends who in 2014, also Army, They went to Peshmerga because they don't know anything about Assyrians. So do we know who these people are? Thank you.
Sorry, Josh, but the question is just a general one in terms of, can people go back? Can people do this in terms of self-defense? Yeah. So the question is legal on a technical note, but yes, there are some mechanisms in which it was being done. So the Kurdistan regional government allowed some people do it, but only for the ones that were subject to their authority. And there's a Christian Science, so one of the forces that did this in Iraq was called the Dwekh Noshe. It was an Assyrian version of the Peshmerga in terms of name. Presented itself as the Assyrian army, and they had foreigners in there. And the Christian Science Monitor article revealed, quite sadly, by the way, there they were presenting themselves as this force, and they had foreigners within them that were the KRG allowed in, specifically the Barzanis. And then this article exposed the fact how when the point for liberation came, they were told to go home. They weren't actually allowed to participate in it because they had no decisional autonomy. So the point that I would want to make to you is opportunities like this have existed. I can't speculate. In truth, I can't speculate as to what it would look like. It would be illegal right now. I also don't know how efficacious it would be in terms of our resource mobilization capacity. Yeah. Even if we did it legally, it's okay. Even if we did it legally, we don't have the resource mobilization capacity behind it. That benefits more than what the locals do for themselves. But we can empower them to do it. And that should be the priority because they're there, willing and ready. Mariam? And then Miqrata Rochelle?
So I don't have a question. I have more of a comment. Thank you so much for this presentation. I think it's actually really important for us to visualize where we came from in order to see where we can go. And in that spirit, my comment is this. We're not minorities. You said something about shifting our mindset. It's got to start with that. We're not minorities. And the more we think about ourselves as minorities and as, when we advocate for minority rights and all that stuff, none of that is going to serve us, in my opinion. We really need to start seeing ourselves as an indigenous nation. It is our right to be sovereign. It is our right to have decisional autonomy, self-determination. Those are the things that we need to start thinking about. The reason we're minorities is because of all these genocides, these systematic ways that we have been dispossessed and displaced and dislocated from our land, which takes you back to your question about how we became a diaspora nation if we are thinking of ourselves in that way. But actually, I just see that it's really important for us to start understanding that we are indigenous to this land, and that's why we call it Bet Nahran, and that's why we call ourselves Ashuraye or Aturay or whatever word you want to use. But you are not minorities. If I could delete that word, it is very, very state-centric. That's how the state defines us and says you get religious rights, you get to build churches. That's great. It's not enough, and it's not going to keep Assyria alive. So we really need to start thinking of ourselves as Ganan starts with that. I'm indigenous. I'm not a minority. I've become fewer in number through specific policies, and I demand sovereignty, not religious rights, not language rights.
Absolutely.
I'll stop there.
No.
First off, I applaud my sister for all her statements. I applaud API for the great effort you put forward, the great women, young women that I see on stage. Yes, please. By saying that, I don't undermine the men. We see them now behind women supporting them, so thank you very much. And yes, Michael, Ganan is a very effective, important reunification that we should take in empowering the Assyrian cause and goals. You are specialized in foreign policies and international policies and policy making, right? And you have a great experience in that field, working in international and foreign countries. You know that Sykes-Picot Agreement and the extension of Sykes-Picot Agreement is coming to expiration. And we know that the world stage is a game of chess between superpowers, how they divide the world on how they can roll. And as insignificant as we have been called, just like my sister said, we are the indigenous people of the land that have never been given any role in the Sykes-Picot, any recognition. How do you see us mobilizing our effort to be considered significant and those indigenous people that have been uprooted from our land to be given our rights?
Yeah. So, Miroda Rochelle, a community leader with years of experience and achievement, is asking a big question, which is fair. And again, I have to say, it's going to be a partial answer because these are things we need to figure out as a community. And I would never, ever want anyone thinking, I've got the answers or all the answers. But the first part would be what Mariam discussed in relation to the wider discussion of what it means for us as a people to reorganize ourselves in a way to build our own power. And the first implication of that is time. When I said 100 years, 500 years, 1,000 years, you indicated Sykes-Picot is technically seeing a potential reconfiguration, and there's Zygmunt Brzezinski's grand chessboard metaphor in terms of international relations. But we're not in a position to influence those things yet because we haven't invested in anything. So then what happens is, because very concerned and mobilized Assyrians in our community know we have no internal power, they go and beg foreign powers. They plead with foreign powers to do something for us. But what I tried to convey in this presentation is it's never worked. So unfortunately, what it means is, in changing our mentality, including with what Rabita Mariam discussed, we also have to take a longer view. We can't rush from one crisis to the next. We don't need to ignore the crises, we need to deal with them, but we need to have a longer term view. And we certainly do not fall into the same repeated cycle of dropping all our energy and resources into advocacy with foreign governments that have never, ever, ever served us. Do I have any time left, or have we gone completely over?
We're over, but you have one more question waiting too. So.
Okay. I would just want to conclude by saying, go back 100 years. I think this is a fair historical comparison. So Francis Humphreys, writing to his Beatitude Mar Shimon, 1932, the patriarch wrote about the Assyrian levies to the British. You made promises, we have fulfilled our end. I also need our people's levies in the north because of what's happening in Iraq right now. So Francis Humphreys wrote, A, the demands of the Assyrian nation are not in the interest of my nation, the United Kingdom, Great Britain, and you're not allowed to move those levies. You have an agreement with us, and if you do, X, Y, Z will happen. What happened in 1933? So unfortunately, this is a very poor answer, but I'm just trying to give an answer that gives some perspective within time. We need a longer view, and we need to stop doing what we're doing and start focusing on how we organize ourselves, and that starts with changing our mentality completely. The last question?
I can ask it later just because we're like short on time, so yeah, don't worry. You sure? I know you said you don't have all the answers, but now with like the NPU not existing in the same way it did before, what kind of policies can we advocate for back home to ensure that we're like practicing Gan and Qaganan?
Back home?
Yes.
Very good question. Identify the organizations, identify the groups that are free Assyrians, that are not under the control of others, and find out what their policies are and how you can support them. If they are controlled by the KDP, by Badr, by others, anathemize them. If they're independent and you agree with their policies, support. If you don't agree with their policies, talk to them. But engage. But on this side, I would start with the NDAA reporting requirement. We can leverage that. That's why I said the advocacy and Ganan can be mutually self-reinforcing. Let's get the U.S. government to give us as much information as we can squeeze out of them to empower us to better understand our situation. And then use that to leverage some influence with what Free Assyrians in Iraq, and I want to end on this note, and in Turkey, and in Syria, in Jordan, in Lebanon, in Iran are doing, and elsewhere. Right? So I just want to end on the note that we have talked about Iraq, but we can take this principle and this mindset to everywhere and where we are indigenous. Okay, thank you all, and I hope you continue this discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Youash. We are 6 minutes over time? I'm going to try and be brief just to get us back on time. I am here to really offer reflections on the theme, which is, why am I blanking on it? It's a turning point and a new path forward, sorry. And the reason why we came upon this theme and why we decided on this theme really was because of everything that we discussed in this previous session. And really, it was the dismantling of the NPU as we once knew it that forced us as a team to really look at not only what the future of the organization was going to be, but what our future vision for our work broadly, right, our advocacy was going to be. It felt like a lot of the times we were expending all this energy and working really hard and doing everything that we could, but we weren't getting anywhere. In some sense, it was like we were stuck on a hamster's wheel. And the loss, I guess, of the NPU in the way that it was really forced us to look at, well, now what, right? And it forced us to answer questions like what Annette posed and what Neil just asked. And that's why, in recent months, you may have seen that the API has expanded its mission, and we've expanded the work that we do to focus a lot more on issues that are of concern to our community in diaspora. And you're going to continue to see more of that as we move forward. I was going to prepare remarks, but I sat and I really couldn't figure out what to write, what it was I wanted to say. And I think I want to sort of speak to what Annette had asked. And Michael alluded to this as well. We're all here. Some of you traveled coast to coast to get here. And the question that I ask myself as someone that's in this space that does this work on a day-to-day basis, why does this even matter to us, right? Why do we do this? What is it that keeps us coming to these types of places and having these types of conversations? And what is it that excites us, right, about small things, like when my colleague Atur Sergon became the first Assyrian woman to hold public office in the state of Illinois? Why did that inspire me, right? Why did that resonate with me? Or when we have an Assyrian that competes on the History Channel's Alone show, and you see he's wearing an Assyrian t-shirt and you're like, yeah, that guy's Assyrian, he killed a wolverine, like why does that matter? And I wish, and I've been thinking this through, and I wish I had a better answer for you. The truth is I don't know. I just know that it does, and I know that it does to everyone in this room too, because you're here. And it really is. The news about the NPU was truly devastating for our team, and I know, of course, that's saying nothing compared to what those that are living in the Nineveh Plain experienced or felt about it. And for a while, it was difficult to find reasons to hope and reasons to keep our team motivated. And for me, it's always been, I always draw inspiration from the people around me, and people like those that are in this room. And so I do want to use this time to highlight some of these people. And I'm going to, nobody knows that I'm going to do this, but I'm going to ask that you stand when I do that. I mentioned Annette earlier, so I'm going to ask you to stand. Annette is working with Google to get Assyrian translations added on Google Translate. That's incredible. Esther Lang is here. Esther, are you here? If you can stand. Where is she? Yeah, Esther. Esther has digitized hundreds, if not thousands, of periodicals of Syrian publications over the past century, and she's made them accessible to a wider audience, and she's preserved them. Sorry to put you on the spot, Esther, but we appreciate what you do. Yasmin Al-Taji started a podcast where she gives updates weekly on the latest happenings. Is Yasmin in this room? I know she was here earlier. Yasmin? Yeah, there she is. My dear friend Caroline Benjamin couldn't be here today, but my friend Caroline and Ramina Samuel, who is here, if you could stand up. These two women are part of District 219, which is a high school district in Illinois, and they have for 8 years, I'm 30 now, I was 22 when they started doing this, they have been championing an Assyrian language course, an accredited Assyrian language program that would allow high school students in Illinois to take Assyrian as a world language and have it fulfill their requirements for graduation. And they have, and I know because I've watched them all along the way, but they have come upon so many different barriers, and not once did they say, all right, it's time to give up. They've continued fighting, and now Illinois is poised to become the first state in the U.S. to recognize Assyrian as an accredited world language program, and it's because of them. But of course, we can't get anywhere without allies, so I also want to shout out someone else who's here from District 219, Miss April Stallworth, who has been an incredible ally to our community. She's been an incredible ally to our community. She's helped push forward that course. She's amazing just for being here. She doesn't have to be here, but she's here to learn more about our community because the district serves such a large population of Assyrians, and it means a lot that you're here, April. Thank you. I've got a few more. Who follows Assyrian Archive on Instagram? Ramson, stand up. Ramson Adam. Yeah. Ramson, on his own, started gathering old archived photos and testimonies and whatnot from modern Assyrian history, and he's done his best to, again, make it accessible to a wider audience, and we so appreciate the work that you do, and we're excited to see where you go from here. We know you have big plans. My friend, I think Mary Oshana is here. Is she in the back? Is she still here, Mary? Well, she became the first Assyrian woman elected in my hometown, Skokie. Just wanted to give her a quick shout out, but I think she stepped out. We also have, and I apologize if I pronounce it wrong, but Shabnam Samuel here. If you could stand, she's in the back in the beautiful Indian garb. Shabnam wrote an incredible article talking about her grandmother's experience fleeing the Assyrian genocide. So her grandmother was Assyrian, and she fled and wound up in India, and of course married her grandfather, who was of Indian background. And she wrote this beautiful article that you can look up. We can also send it out, but it just spoke to this desire that we all have to really connect not only with our own identity but with one another. And I think you moved so many people with that article, Shabnam. So thank you, and thanks for being here. And lastly, I'm not allowed to name him, but there may or may not be someone in this room who is responsible for the Assyrian language keyboard on your iPhone. He might be here somewhere. You might hear from him later today. I don't know. And the reason why I wanted to go that route was because, when I was, and I know I speak for my team, when we were in this space where we weren't sure, what's the way forward? How do we go forward from here? What reasons do we have to hope? We hope because of people like you, because everyone that's doing the small work, that's taking us to that next level, that's, doing this in your own time for most of you, right? You're doing it in your own capacity and whatnot, and just contributing to the greater whole. And I think this has just been so wonderful to see so many different people here and so many new faces. And I think I speak again for the entire team when I say we're more inspired than ever. And I also, because, and Rochelle noted this, because there are so many young women in this room, I do want to conclude on this final note. Assyrian organizing, as all organizing, is often daunting. Every single win, no matter how hard fought, is dwarfed by the immense challenges before us, both in the homeland and the diaspora. Navigating inter-community dynamics can also be a challenge on its own, especially in intergenerational organizing. But I do think it's taken for granted that navigating these spaces is especially challenging for Assyrian women. And so I do want to take a moment to acknowledge all the Assyrian women who too often shrink themselves to fit into spaces that are still too small for their energy and ideas, who don't always speak up for themselves, who endure unfair personal and sexist attacks intended to silence and discredit them, whose contributions are often downplayed or appropriated, who aren't afforded the respect they have earned, and who cry in private and yet still carry on because there's work to be done. And I say that for all the women in this room. We are going to build a better community. We all stand on the shoulders of Assyrian women who endured challenges and made sacrifices far greater than our own. And my hope is that the challenges that we overcome together will make the road easier for those Assyrian women who will follow. Thank you.